This is a Nightline Friday night special.
They are young people living in a broken country.
Hopeless. To the end, hopeless.
Young people trying to overthrow an incredibly repressive regime.
Sick regime. I'm not afraid to say Milosevic.
He has to go.
We are hoping, but he will never leave.
The main idea is to resist.
Resistance, because I love Serbia.
When citizens start thinking, then they become real citizens, not sheep.
If everybody will be afraid, then no one will know the real truth.
Young people willing to risk their freedom, perhaps even their lives, to speak their minds to an American freelance journalist. Tonight, Belgrade's winter of discontent, standing up to Slobodan Milosevic.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Let me tell you what happened in Belgrade today. There was an anti-government, anti-Milosevic demonstration planned. The government knew it was coming, feared it would be large and therefore an embarrassment. So they programmed a couple of pirated editions of new American movies on government TV. One of the movies was American Beauty, the other was the new James Bond flick, The World Is Not Enough. The idea was that people would stay home, watch the movies, and stiff the demonstration. And clearly, some did. Here's a couple of guys earlier today watching the Bond movie. But these opposition leaders, also videotaped earlier today, were not lonely. Take a look at the crowd. About 100,000 Serbians flashing the Serbian victory sign, calling for the overthrow of the Milosevic government. 100,000 people turning out for a political demonstration is not bad by any standard. But after you've seen what we're going to show you tonight, you'll understand how remarkable a turnout it really was. This program tonight is the work of a young freelance cameraman and reporter, Joe Rubin. Joe came to us a few months back, said he was going to spend much of the winter in Belgrade trying to get a handle on what's going on there. And the result gives you an insight you won't find anywhere else. You'll get a sense of just how repressive things are in Belgrade these days and how extraordinary it is that 100,000 people had the courage to demonstrate today. Here's Joe Rubin.
For me, one of the most surprising things about coming from New York City to Belgrade was how remarkably at home I felt. I never expected to find urban rap, nightly jazz, or rain-soaked rock concerts. Belgrade's cosmopolitan atmosphere made me even more curious about just what young people in Serbia are thinking these days. Here they are in the heart of a Europe whose borders and currencies are seemingly melting into one. And then there's Serbia, isolated and rocked by ancient hatreds. I wanted to find out how young Serbians, who have come of age during these war-torn Milosevic years, have weathered the storm. I spent a lot of time with Slobodan Milosevic. Slobodan says that if it weren't for Milosevic, he'd be just a typical 24-year-old. But typical moments, like playing basketball with his younger brother Mickey, are rare. Every day, Slobodan rides an overcrowded bus to downtown Belgrade. He's supposed to be finishing up his degree in mechanical engineering, but he rarely makes it to Belgrade University.
And any student that would like to stay in this country and to work under these conditions should not study at all, because it's much better if you smuggle gasoline or whatever. I mean, you will earn much more money.
Slobodan spends most of his time here at the headquarters of an upstart political movement called Otpor, or Resistance. They have about 5,000 mostly young members across Serbia. As this poster of President Slobodan Milosevic can attest to, they are a bold lot.
We're young, smart people, aggressive. We want some changes, and it's not good for him. If we want changes and we want them right now, then that means that he has to go. but he's not very pleased with the idea of going.
Resistance because I love Serbia.
Otpor approaches politics more like savvy Nike marketers than militants. Their trademark clenched fist is everywhere in Belgrade. The girl in this photo shoot is a famous Serbian teen actress, posing for an Otpor publicity campaign, which loosely translates, say hello with a fist. And it's not just photo ops like these where resistance is getting support from some of Serbia's most recognizable faces. Maria Baralucci was sitting in the audience at the National Theater when Serbia's most famous actor, Voja Bravic, had a surprise for the audience.
That night, he just took off his pajama and showed this T-shirt of ours.
How did you feel when that?
Oh, fantastic. I was sure that we are doing a good thing and right thing.
Otpor's underdog struggle against Milosevic may seem like an easy one for Americans to identify with. But many of the young activists wanted me to know that they're also angry with the United States.
As you can see.
Slobodan brought me to this bombed-out area of Belgrade.
And this is military hospital. And the windows of that hospital were totally destroyed, smashed. So people which were settled into the hospital were hurt, sick people.
He says he will never forget or completely forgive the sustained NATO bombing of his city.
I mean, man, what do you think when you see totally destroyed building? You cannot feel familiar with that.
Slobodan is also upset about the plight of Kosovo Serbs.
Okay, da.
On the outskirts of Belgrade, he took me to this refugee camp where he volunteers organizing aid.
This is everything they have, you know, just a few pickles, as you can see, and some sausages, and that's all. For all day.
It's a sad and crowded place. This family of 7 had to abandon their farm in Kosovo for this tiny room.
The biggest trouble is because they don't have any idea what are they going to do in their life, you know. When you don't have food, when you don't have water, when you don't have anything, you will survive, you know, because you don't have idea, you don't have light in your head. But without that light, without any hope, what kind of man are you?
Slobodan's family flat is a cheery place with plenty of food on the table, but not because their financial situation is any better than typical Serb families. Slobodan's mom hasn't been paid her economist salary in months. Slobodan's dad spends the work week here in the village of his birthplace, near the Kosovo border. Before Milosevic, Mr. Đinović was a prominent lawyer. These days, he's a subsistence farmer, providing almost everything that the Đinović family eats back in Belgrade.
We are providing all necessary things, all substantial things for living, like meat, like cheese, like fruit, smoked meat. We are very lucky. There are lots of families inside of Serbia that are really suffering, you know. They don't have enough for food, you know.
When we come back, the iron fist that the young Serbs are up against.
This is ABC News Nightline.
At first glance, this could be a typical winter morning in any city. The sights and sounds are familiar. But this is Belgrade, where the everyday urban landscape includes reminders that just a year ago, war was raging with NATO. A city where an international embargo means you fuel up with gasoline-filled Coke bottles purchased on the black market. That's if you're one of the fortunate ones. This morning brought the kind of headlines that Belgradans have grown accustomed to. News of the latest assassination, that of Arkin. I was confused. Arkin was supposed to be an untouchable, a powerful gangster, and President Milosevic's brutal enforcer. And now he was dead. At Arkin's memorial service, I caught up with independent journalist Rade Rankovic and his wife Saska to get some perspective. For Rade, Arkin's assassination was just the latest reminder that anyone, no matter where he falls on the political spectrum, can disappear if he's deemed a threat to the Milosevic regime. Rade is convinced the same thing happened to his mentor at the fiercely anti-Milosevic newspaper, the Daily Telegraph. Rade worked as an editor there. Last April, just days after Milosevic shut down the paper, the Telegraph's publisher, Slavko Cheruvia, was assassinated by masked gunmen. These days, Rade reports for the Voice of America, often filing over the telephone late at night. Saska believes it was this essay by the publisher that signed his death warrant.
What's the next Milosevic? Meaning, what will you destroy next?
Rade took me to the alley where the assassination took place.
And this is the place where Slavko was killed. It was a tragedy for journalism in Serbia.
So who do you think did it?
I don't know. Regime. It's enough. I'm not afraid to say Milosevic or Mira Markovic. It's a regime, sick regime.
I arrived in Serbia just as the cold winds that they call Koševa began to blow down the Danube. Coming from America, I thought I was just in time for a revolution. Following his war with NATO, Milosevic looked weak and isolated. And with the Serbian economy in shambles, Milosevic's approval rating was at an all-time low. Amidst the masses who wait an hour just to board impossibly crowded buses like these, I wondered if Milosevic would survive this harsh Balkan winter. But I quickly discovered that the 3-month-old protests that were calling for Milosevic's resignation were actually dwindling. Many of Serbia's bitterly divided opposition leaders had refused to join the marchers, despite their trademark noisy whistles. The nightly protests resemble more of a vigil than a revolution.
Nobody wants to be the last victim of this madman, Slobodan Milosevic. Everybody feels that he has to go somehow, not exactly knowing which way he's going to go and how, but he's going to go this year. And they don't want to be the last victim. That's why they are absent during these protests.
Many on Belgrade's streets think international sanctions and NATO's bombing have tightened Milosevic's grip on power.
When the first bomb came to our country, that means that Slobodan Milosevic will stand here forever. 100% he will be in Serbia, and he will be our dictator, and he will be our president forever, till his death.
Back at the Beta news agency, where Saska works, she took a moment to watch the fledgling street protests. But while the opposition continues its infighting, Milosevic has stepped up his attacks on the press, shutting down newspapers and radio stations all over the country.
I'm sure that this country is going into even biggest repression and in even biggest dictatorship. They are of course aware that at one point they will have to make elections. And I think they will try to kill all the independent media, or as much independent media as they can until that elections.
And Studio B, the only opposition TV station in Belgrade, is clinging to the airwaves, weathering over $1 million in fines from the regime and attacks on their employees by paramilitary thugs. But while the news goes on, that doesn't mean that viewers can tune in.
Right now you have jamming of a program because our most influential news in prime time, it is 7 o'clock in the evening in Belgrade now. They have just started, and now more than 4 million of spectators are not able to watch our program.
Ms. Kinjanjevic starts out each morning worrying about car bombs.
I mean, that is a normal human feeling, you know, to be frightened of terrorizing yourself. Each morning when I start my car, I'm not sure whether there is anything underneath, so I never take my children with me in the car.
For me, the moment that most captured the deep divisions within Serbia was that of New Year's. The Serbian government was doing its best to make Belgrade feel like any other city about to celebrate the new millennium. Holiday displays were everywhere. Even this government building, which was heavily bombed during the war with NATO, was spruced up with red lights. On New Year's Eve, I stumbled upon these young artists in front of the vandalized American Cultural Center. From their impromptu New Year's exhibit, it was clear that they weren't buying into any holiday cheer.
Hopeless to the end. Hopeless. We don't have hope here. We don't make fun about America. We don't make a fun about Serbia. Our statement is to make a hopeless to being here. It's so hopeless to being here.
And just a couple of hours before the new millennium, I caught up with Slobodan in the heart of downtown Belgrade, but he was in no mood for celebration.
Optimism is good, but as you can see, you cannot find it a lot, among these people. Do you see any face, that is smiling? No, I don't think so.
The official government celebration of New Year's was an eerie affair. Opposition groups in the Serbian Orthodox Church had called for a boycott, and in a city with a population around 2 million, only several hundred showed up at the celebration outside the federal parliament. Amidst the midnight fireworks, I couldn't help but wonder if this was somehow Milosevic's last New Year's dance. The Jinovic family began the New Year's quietly, a toast with family and friends. But along with the other Otpor activists, Slobodan was planning Resistance's boldest and most provocative move on the Serbian stage. On January 13th, they were to have their own unique celebration of Serbian Orthodox New Year's. All over Serbia, Otpor set up voting stands for what was to be a kind of Academy Awards of resistance. Ballots were cast for dissident professors, jailed journalists, and rebellious rock stars. Slobodan and his colleague, Ivan Marovic, took to the airwaves, taking votes.
With these awards we're going to give to most resistant people in last year, we'll try to encourage others to be resistant, because individual resistance is key to democratic changes here, because when citizens start thinking, then they become real citizens, not sheep.
As workers put the final touches on the stage, Slobodan gave some final instructions. He warned people not to be baited into any confrontations. The previous evening, state television had called resistance a terrorist organization. As the evening got underway, it was clear that Otpor had pulled off an impressive turnout. An estimated 30,000 crowded the historic Square of the Republic. But as the clock struck midnight, the organizers had a surprise. No fireworks, no music, just this video.
We stopped celebration in the middle, after the midnight, and we mentioned all dead people. People who get killed in the last bombing, in the last war. Mentioned Serbs, Albanians, everybody. So we said to go home, there is no reason to celebrate. We just need to do something else.
As I was taking shots in a sea of young people, I spotted Slobodan's dad. He was there to support Slobodan. He says that with all the pessimism in Serbia, he is hopeful and convinced that the majority of Serbs are with these young people. But of course, he also worries that politics will keep Slobodan from finishing school, and that a cornered dictator will give these kids a lesson in repression. And I worry too about the consequences of my reporting. Since I left Serbia, the Milosevic regime has cracked down on the resistance movement, arresting and roughing up students all over the country. Shortly before I left, I had a conversation about my concerns with one of Otpor's activists in downtown Belgrade. you think that maybe they don't want me to do a story like
Of course they want. Of course they want to stop us of saying this. If they will see this, then I'll be in a big trouble. And they don't want you to show the real picture in the rest of the world and everything. I mean,
well, I already feel terrible about getting anyone in trouble. I mean, how do you feel like it's a mistake to maybe even be talking to me?
I don't think so. I mean, of course we're all a little afraid, but I'm just like maybe the rest of the braver people. I don't know, is that good or bad though? But to express what I feel and being able to face with the consequences as long as they're not too much. Yes, we all want better lives and normal lives, and but if everybody will be afraid, then no one will know the real truth. That's the problem. So I'm one of the people who dares to say what's really happening here.
And I'll be back in a moment. If you'd like to ask your own questions about tonight's broadcast, you can chat online with Slobodan Milosevic, one of the youth activists from Otpor. He'll join us on abcnews.com live from Belgrade immediately after tonight's broadcast. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.